Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Just a reminder that it is recorded and will be uploaded onto YouTube. This is my first appointment as a chair, so it is going to be a learning curve for me, and I do recognise the responsibility that comes with leading the committee. That is an area of significance for both the council and our tenants. The findings of the regulator of social housing make it clear that substantial improvements are required. The role of this committee is to provide constructive challenge, independent oversight, and public accountability throughout that improvement process. My expectation is that this committee will operate professionally, fairly, and constructively. We are not here to apportion blame, nor are we here to engage in political point scoring. We are here to ask the necessary questions, examine the evidence before us, and ensure that that process is being made. Most importantly, we must remember that behind every report, performance measure, action plan, there are thousands of tenants and families who rely upon these services. Their safety, well-being, and confidence in the council as their landlord must remain at the centre of our work. So thank you for that. And I would like to go on to apologies for absence. Apologies for absence.
I haven't received any apologies.
And does any members have any declarations of interest? No. I'm going to leave the terms of reference till a little bit later on in the discussion, but I would like to invite Rob Murphy to present his presentation.
Thank you, Chair. It might be worth first just doing a quick introduction of officers who are present.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you'd like to introduce yourself, that would be nice. Start with the housing team.
Yes, I'll go first. Good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Edgar, and I'm the new Housing Compliance and Assurance Manager for the Council. And I'm on day 4 here, so please bear with me.
Morning, everyone. I'm Susan Ogle, Head of Housing Services.
Morning, everyone. I'm Steph Corbett. I'm the Housing Maintenance and Asset Manager within Housing.
Morning, councillors. I'm Simon Nielsen. I'm the Executive Director for Place and Regeneration, so alongside Environment and Transport and Economic Development and Growth, planning and, of course, housing through Rob's service.
Thank you. So I'm Rob Murphy, and I'm Director of Housing and Planning. So I look after the planning and the planning committees and the planning functions, all the housing functions, and also supporting matters like building and trouble. Okay. This first meeting is going to be unusual in that the standard work programme will be having a focus on the improvement work and performance. However, housing is a complex area of work, and while formerly was a housing board back in pre-LGR days, since the county council became a landlord again in 2015, we haven't had a general compliance. So for the presentation, and I've told you before, a lengthy one. This is scene setting. After that, we will go into current performance, and then we'll go into the action plan. And then, as the chair has said, after you've heard all that, we're in discussion. Then perhaps to say whether we think the draft terms of reference are appropriate. Can we do the presentation first? I will be saying, well, I will circulate a copy of this afterwards and answer to any questions that come up as well. So there's no need to take copious notes as we do. Right. The topics that are covered in this presentation is the background to the landlord role of the County Council, the role of the social housing regulator, consumer standards, the judgment, the first full inspection, current performance, a report on tenant satisfaction, and then we'll move into the regulatory compliance improvement into the action plan, like the responses. Then we have the questions and discussion on future programme, data and documentation requirements. Next. Background. We're going to take the point in history on that. That in LGR, all 6 district councils held housing stock, council housing as it was called. However, at about the turn of the century, there was a large-scale voluntary transfer of stock to Cardiff and Benicia. Some of the districts retained stock, which was and the Lyme Valley. In 2002, the Lyme Valley started by stock transfer, well, by outsourcing effectively to an arm's length management organisation that incorporated annex stock in LGR in 2009. So that was an extension, an arm's length company, which became called Homes for Northumberland. So an ALMO, an arm's length management organisation, was not for profit, set up by LAs to improve social housing on their behalf. However, the councils and then the county councils retained broader policy making and strategic decisions on housing while using the day-to-day management. They use the ALMO for that. Post the local government organisation in 2009, which more further changes. The ALMO was disbanded and the management of stock was brought into the county council in 2015. It was, the headlines at the time was it was to improve service. But when it was brought in, there was a reduction in capacity in terms of the managerial and technical abilities there as a budget saving. And as I mentioned earlier, oversight was reduced because there wasn't actually a full board for it in the sense that it had before. There was primarily a focus, and it was a well-justified one, on stock expansion. In other words, increasing the amount of council housing stock, and that emphasis has continued through the administration since then, very, very recently. However, what wasn't anticipated was that when the ALMO was disbanded and housing brought back into the county council in 2015, the financial modelling didn't anticipate the fact that there was the National Rent Fund, the Welfare Reform Act, which altered all the long-term and medium-term financial planning. So in 2016, when it was brought back in internally, a new service was formed, Public Protection and Housing, with very much a focus on operational matters. And this overlapped the entire rent freeze period. Right. The next big change came in 2023 when I was appointed to this post. Susan was appointed and Simon was put in his position. In that we realised very quickly that a new approach to housing was required. So then we've had an assurance board, which is officer, member and tenants, but basically an internal board looking at performance. We had a tenant influence panel. We reviewed the approaches, the wider approaches to tenants involvement. We got an independent health and safety lead, and then there was a number of reviews in terms of are now taking place on data-led performance on the home finder system. You'll see it went to council common allocation policy changes, and will be coming forward shortly with new standard tenancies. The mission statement was to develop working collaboratively with tenants and elected members. That probably isn't appropriate still, so we'll need to revisit. Right, just to be really clear, and this is something we need to, when we talk about housing, we are not talking about all housing issues. We are talking about the landlord role, which is that paid for, or what we call the housing revenue account. That's a separate fund, the general fund, where basically rent comes in and we pay for all the housing services out of that. So what is covered by the HRA is repairs and maintenance, providing housing services to your residents, communal items, for example, lifts and stairways, depreciation and loan charges, and then recharges for any central costs like IT and HR. What's covered by the general fund are things like the housing advice service, the homelessness service, the private rented sector standards improvement and enforcement, support for vulnerable people, choice-based letting systems, actual definition of policy, antisocial behaviour services, outside the landlord functions. The actual, where it's our tenants, ASB is funded by the HRA. Housing benefits, things like that, are done by the general fund, and then costs of construction of new houses, the enabling costs for that, for example, planning is the general fund. Just to give an idea of the scale of the importance of this board, the value of our stock, undiscounted, is £854 million. So this board is overseeing the improvement of management rations for an asset of heading towards £1 billion. But our stock, because of that background I mentioned, you'll see it's primarily focused in the Blythe and the Alnwick areas. However, that's changed as the right to buy has taken stock away from us. But also, we've been building stock at a modest rate. So that distribution there is where our stock is. 65% of houses, 16% of flats. To be clear, post-Grenfell, all the changes to safety requirements for high and medium rise blocks do not apply for us. So we won't be talking post-Grenfell issues. 18% bungalows, 1% maisonettes. You'll see the bulk there is made up of 2 and 3 bed stock. Only 1.9% is 4 bed. Only 0.5% is 5 bed, and 0.01% is 6 bed. And that mix there of houses, flats, and sizes probably doesn't reflect current housing need. 94.4% is of the traditional construction, however, almost 1% is of solid stone. The historical distribution is not just by geography. We have inherited a range of stock, it's been constructed to different designs and standards. So 60% of our properties are between 60 and 80 years old. 18% is over 80 years old. So we have a high demand for larger houses and bungalows and a lower demand for maisonettes, small bungalows, sheltered accommodation, new entrance flats. So that stock distribution, because it's based on history, doesn't necessarily match what the actual need is. The average energy performance, the EPC, energy performance certificate, is band C. Anything which is band D is the focus for our retrofit priority for our warmer homes teams. The one good highlight is that indicative figures suggest that 98.6% of our homes meet the government's decent home standards. Authority stock isn't to that level, or councils don't know what that license. We're doing more work on that. I'll come on to it later. So asset management, we have an 11 million annual capital investment programme, with additional 800,000 for adaptations that would be for medical needs. We have an internal stock condition team, which has been supplemented by external capacity. And the next 5 years will see continued investment in some priority areas about delivering decent homes, 6.5 million over the next 5 years, and then maximising that external funding to improve energy efficiency, £7 million over the next 3 years. The energy efficiency one is a key measure that government look at as for quality, but it's a key actual real life issues for reducing energy bills and the cost of living for our tenants. Because if we go back there, sorry, the 18% of property that's over 80 years old, some of that is currently not the highest energy efficiency rates and it's expensive to run as a house. Right. What is new is that we have, this is the April 2024 issued regulator of social housing role, and this is the code of practice. The regulator works at a landlord level, that's i.e. with us, to drive improvements. It doesn't work directly with individual tenants. Individual complaints from individual residents goes to the housing ombudsman. They have a focus on all local authorities who are stock owning providers like ourselves. In the past, they only worked with the housing associations. So it's important to remember the housing associations have got a very long history of being subject to the housing regulator, but for us it's new. So the new inspections regime came in the 1st of April 2024. We volunteered to be a pilot for that, which perhaps was useful in some regards. And then they published regulatory judgment that described their views of their views of landlord's performance against their standards in that document. Okay. So it's focused on what they've published. They are really clear now. So some performance figures you will hear are very high, but if the reporting mechanisms don't meet the practice of the governance, the assurance, then we got scored down. Okay. So that consumer standard, the regulator will have regard to that code when assessing whether or not we're delivering the standards. We need to use that as a way of assessing how we are approaching the work. The responsibility lies with boards and councils to deliver the outcome of the standards. To keep assurance on that. It's important to remember this is what they call a co-regulatory approach. So the regulator needs to see certain outcomes. How we achieve them is up to us, providing we meet the code of practice. We need to have robust mechanisms in place to make sure that assurance is taking place. Right, I'm going to go through the standards now very quickly. This is the most significant one for us. Stock quality. So safe and well-maintained homes are a fundamental responsibility. We need to have sufficiently detailed understanding of condition at the individual property level. Okay. In the past, remember that history slide? Both ourselves post 2015, homes for Northumberland, the Almo, and the districts before that, what we call a sample basis. If there was a street, say, of 3-bed, brick built, all built at the same time, they perhaps looked at one of them to check its fundamental stock condition, see whether they know what time it would need a new roof, etc., things like that. Whereas now, we need to do it on a property by property basis. So we're expected to undertake regular physical assessments of inside and outside homes and assess that homes are safe and free from serious hazards and good repair and meet standards. 5-year rolling programme is normally appropriate, but that needs to be influenced by age, construction, and data from complaints, what we learn from repairs and maintenance, energy performance, and health and safety assessments, and also understanding the context of the needs for individual tenants as well. A thing that we'll talk about probably more at future meetings is access. And what the standard says is that where access is needed, we should take all reasonable steps to access. I'll perhaps bring Steph in later on to talk about sometimes, for example, when we're doing electrical inspections, we have trouble accessing the properties. Sometimes that results even perhaps needing us to achieve, get court requirements to access properties to do certain checks. Decency. We're trying to meet the government decent homes guidance. We need to do repairs and maintenance to ensure that homes are maintained to that decent home standards and to achieve it. We have an effective plan in place to make sure all homes meet that standard and all homes need to be from the lowest energy category 1 hazards. Health and safety. We need to understand and meet all the individual health and safety requirements, including secondary legislation and suitable performance data. So there are separate requirements on gas, fire, electrical, water, lifts, asbestos, smoke alarms, and carbon monoxide checks. Big requirements coming out of our health and safety lead. And that we need to have assurance that homes meet health and safety requirements that reflects levels of potential risk. And have a good understanding about what the data is telling us about safety and the effectiveness of how we're working. And then any actions identified from health and safety assessments should be carried out as quickly as possible. Adaptations, that's where we adopt houses for particular needs. We have in place a process to assist tenants in need of housing adaptations. We tell them about and tell tenants about the application process and make clear about any variations. The transparency, influence and accountability code, of course, we should have a strong culture throughout the organisation of fairness, courtesy and respect, where tenants are listened to and can trust their landlord. This is a constant thing. We need to consider how we can adapt services and communications to meet individual tenants' needs. At a future session, we can talk about things like the Getting to Know You programme, where we work with tenants to understand their needs. Clearly, knowing how we adapt services to meet needs, we need to understand what those needs are. Diversity. We need to consider the diverse needs of tenants and prospective tenants. So that's by virtue of age, their circumstances, their health, and other issues of diversity. We need to investigate complaints of alleged discrimination promptly and implement any relevant learning from understanding those complaints. And have robust information about tenants so we can deliver fair and equitable outcomes. That includes protected characteristics and how we support and communicate with them. We need to explore a range of methods of collecting information from tenants, for example, via periodic face-to-face or other points of contact. We'll take out the findings and demonstrate actions and make tenants aware how services tend to their needs. As an aside, why this is important is get requests to do repairs and make changes to houses. However, we are always aware and trying to address the issue that, say, for example, some of our older tenants who may have been in their house for an extended period don't feel like they should be making a fuss. Or so it's about how we make sure we pick up people who don't complain. So understanding what actual tenants' needs are is really important. Engagement with tenants. So we should have a genuine consideration of tenants' views in the heart of decision making, including setting service standards, targets, and responsive repair timescales. And councillors, and this is be an important role for this board moving forward as well, is councillors should assure themselves that tenants' views have been actively sought and considered as part of decision making on service standards, etc. We need to communicate to tenants how their views are taken into account, take steps to ensure all tenants have equal opportunity to be involved in influence strategies, policies and services. And whenever we consider changing management arrangements, we should communicate with tenants and tailor tenant communication to individuals. For information about landlord services, we need to give out about communicating tenants, about providing clear accessible information. We should make tenants aware of services and be really clear with tenants different ways they can contact us. And we can give you some examples of the work we do at the moment on that. One of them will be on the tenant satisfaction work. The performance information, tenants, you see there's a theme here. Tenants need to have accurate performance information about services to help with transparency and scrutiny. We need to publish performance against the tenant satisfaction measures, the TSMs. I'll come on to that later. In a way required by the regulator, and we should be considering reporting it to tenants in a way which is suitable for them. Demonstrate that we understand our performance, and we need to include where, why, that we understand why performance has changed over time. Clear and measurable plans to improve performance. Consider how we can support tenants to understand the information and to demonstrate any changes. Again, another theme here. They'll be able to demonstrate any changes made to landlord services as a result of tenants' views, including learning from complaints. Complaints. So, County Council has a complaints procedure, and we are setting up a sub-version of that. So there's a particular specific housing complaints capacity. But the code makes certain requirements about this. So the complaints procedures is that we address complaints fairly, effectively and promptly. It's essential to build trust. Making sure that tenants are aware of an easy complaints process and will be listened to. Provide regular updates to complaints about the progress on their complaint. Having clear about timescales. Consider the requirements of other bodies, including the Housing Ombudsman and the Complaint Handling Code. That means is, we have a good performance against this, but where we are found wanting by the Housing Ombudsman on an individual complaint, we need to learn from that to show how we learn from that. And we need to be positive about complaints, and that complaints give a valuable insight into tenants' experiences of interacting with their landlord and users to learn to improve our services. And we need to analyse trends and themes from complaints. Right, our first judgment. The inspection started last November, issued, and it was issued in February. Before I go into this, I'll say that we've approached this positively. We haven't attempted to be defensive, and we are saying, yes, we're going to use this as a way of improving services. External challenge is also really important. Right. So we got our judgment in February 26. We got a C4, a C1 to C4, which is the first time we've actually been formally inspected as the audit commission era. Remember, the audit commission was disbanded, so there's been no external checks like this since that's it. We found very serious failings in Northumberland County Council to deliver the outcomes of those consumer standards, as I've just been through. We must make fundamental changes so that improved outcomes are delivered for tenants, particularly in relation to the safety and quality standards. So there's fundamental changes to the safety and quality standard. Talk about that. And then significant improvement about the tenancy standard. That's the standard tenancy agreement. Transparency of the inputs and the accountability standards. We will circulate again after this meeting the full copy of the judgment along with the presentation slides. So an extract from the judgment, and I'll say there's a theme here. So it's a lack of accurate and up-to-date information on the condition of its homes. We do not have the assurance that homes are safe, well maintained, and meet the decent home standards. This is fundamentally because we do not have comprehensive individual property-based stock condition survey. Remember that in the past, this has not been done ever in the past to our stock. We've done it on a sample basis. So the new world is that we actually absolutely need to have on an individual property basis. And we are required to identify requirements related to health and safety in homes and communal areas, ensure actions and assessments are conducted on a appropriate timescale. There is significant inconsistencies in the reported information and limited evidence that NCC is assured that it identifies and meets all requirements. And the evidence to support the health and safety assessments are accurately recorded and routinely monitored. In terms of what we call a root cause analysis to this, why this has happened. The inconsistency is partly attributable to the fact that individual teams work on things like electrical inspections, repairs and maintenance, gas inspections, etc. And while performance has been high within those teams, they've been active as individual service deliverers. So when you add up all that information together, I'll give you an example. Because all those teams go out and have work programs. When we lose housing stock from right to buy, which we do on a monthly basis, what the regulator found, or what we found through the data, was that actually the different teams had different lists of stock that weren't automatically updated where they'd been lost to right to buy. So part of the important work we're doing is having a single unified system to this, to data, and it's going to be a system-based system. Okay, we'll cover that later. The tender requires an effective, efficient and timely repair service. And while the regulator said, yes, the reported performance is meeting our targets, what they're saying is no evidence is considering the needs of tenants or kept tenants involved with clear and timely communication. So these are two separate issues. So our repairs and maintenance performance is very, very strong. We are top 25% in the country. What the regulator says the code requires is that we need to be tailoring it more to the needs of tenants, perhaps prioritising even more certain tenants who need their repairs first. They saw evidence that tenants can participate in tenant-led activities and opportunities. And the regulator attended one of our tenant panels, where they found that we didn't provide enough many opportunities for tenants to actually scrutinise detailed performance and influence services. So the NCC does not respond to all complaints in a timely way. There's limited systems in place at this time to ensure information about tenants remains up to date. I did not provide evidence using information it held to ensure equitable outcomes. This is one which has led to change already, because actually our stage one, the bulk of our stage one, the bulk of our complaints are at stage one, and those are resolved within the target timescale, and they are responded to on the basis that meets the housing ombudsman timescales. However, stage two, the more complex complaints, we weren't meeting the timescales. They said that we could not provide evidence it was offering suitable tenancies or terms of occupation that were compatible with all the needs of individual households, or making use of efficient use of its stock. When it says Northumberland Council is making improvements when it says that Northumberland is making improvements to that area, what that was alluding to was that we have a new standard tenancy agreement currently with the tenants panel. However, what an inspection does, this is the theme, they look at that day. So at that day, we did not have an updated tenancy agreement. Okay, so we were scored against that. And they require us to more clearly work in partnership with the appropriate local authority departments, the police and other organisations to deter and tackle antisocial behaviour and hate incidents in the neighbourhoods where we provide social housing. They said that throughout the inspection, we engaged constructively with them, and that we need to urgently develop a full understanding of current risks to tenants and the root causes of the failings identified, and that from the data of the distribution, our engagement will be intensive and we'll be seeking assurance that we are making progress and sufficient change, including how it delivers an improvement programme. So what we are doing now, we have regular meetings with the housing regulator improvement team, and we are reporting to them, and we'll be talking to how that fits into this board later. What they say is that they will work with us to ensure that risk tenants are managed and mitigated as a priority, and while it takes improvements are required. Importantly, what they said is they are not proposing to use their enforcement powers at this stage, will keep us under review. So if they had found serious fundamental failings in meeting health and safety requirements, for example, they could have used their enforcement powers. They did note in the final meeting with them that we had an extremely lean structure And again, this is an echo of history from when House Northumberland was more back in house. Savings were made. So part of our reaction to that is Scott, who was on his 4th day, it was focused on primarily on how we report all assurance and make sure that progress is being made at pace. And for members' reassurance, that Simon and I have given Scott free rein to ask to be as challenging as he wishes and not to hold back from asking any questions. Right. The actual performance, how are we actually doing? This is an update from last Friday. Right. The gas safety requirement. So every property needs to be visited once every 12 months to make sure that any gas equipment is working safely and efficiently. It's carried out by in-house, formally registered operatives, and that generates a certificate which is then input into the system as evidence. So our target is 100%, our current performance is 100%. Electrical safety. So social landlords must ensure that electrical testing is carried out every 5 years to individual properties and communal flats. And the report must be issued to tenants after the testing being carried out and recorded on the system. Our target for this is 100%. Our focus is 100% on the communal areas and 88% on properties. This is an area that when Susan and I gave this responsibility that we noted that actually the reporting on how electrical safety inspections have been done seemed to be somewhat inconsistent. So we weren't assured, to use the terminology, that we could put down on our hearts and say, yes, they've been done. So what we did, we took difficult step was we effectively reset that to 0 and said they all need to do it again. So there's been a real process to catch up. That 88% is a reflection that we do have persistent problems. I mentioned this earlier about access to properties to carry out electrical inspections. Moving forward in the future, we will be looking at aligning electrical and gas and other inspections at the same time. So if we have to take access action, we'll do it only once. Fire risk assessments on our flats. So fire risk assessment involves inspection of communal areas to look at fire risks and hazards, to make sure there's adequate measures to prevent fires, safety measures to keep residents safe. Assessments are carried out by the current health and safety provider on a yearly basis, and the state officers carry out inspections on a monthly basis. Action plans are generated depending on findings, and they're monitored by the health and safety advisor. So the target is 100%, we're at 100% compliance. Smoke and CO alarms, fitted to all single housing properties. Alarms tested every 12 months, and alarms tested during gas safety inspection every 5 years. Target 100%, current performance 100%. See, this interesting thing, so that we find it is possible to gain access more easily with different types of inspections than for electrical. I make no comment on to why residents may be hesitant to allow in their properties to check electrical works, but this is one where we are using a different approach in the future. Legionella risk assessment. This is to do with warm water infection. So there's a legal obligation to carry out Legionella assessments every 12 months in every properties with a communal water spill or individual properties with a solid fuel heating. So we have 8 sheltered schemes with 211 individual flats and 41 properties with solid fuel. And those inspections, because it's so specialist, are carried out by an external contractor and they produce target 100%, performance 100%. Asbestos surveys. Surveys needed when a property is being renovated or demolished, or property has shared communal areas, stairwells or corridors. A survey determines the presence of asbestos, ensures it stays in a safe condition. We have 1,100 properties that require a survey every 12 months. Target 50% off. So this is aside, this is the issue that picked up the issues on the East Hertford houses where historic work into those properties resulted in asbestos being buried in the floors. Passenger lifts. Maintaining lifts and carrying out inspections. We have 7 sheltered schemes with lifts that are inspected every 12 months by an external contractor as certificates issued. Target 100%, current performance 100%. This, though, suffers from slightly what I call the MOT situation. You can have an MOT and pass it, and your car can still break down the next month. And we do have one block, particularly where we have a lot of repairs issues. Damp and mould. This is a new requirement, AMAB's law, which you picked up in the press, was the child who died because of damp and mould in the Midlands in a social rented property. So these are new requirements. So any complaints about damp and mould, we need to inspect within 10 days. We need to give them written finding in 3 days. Any category 1, that's the top hazards, need to be made safe within 24 hours, and repairs to make safe within 5 days. So all 100%, and we have no outstanding or overdue cases. Repairs. We currently carry out an average of 30,000 repairs per year. 8,135 homes. Targets for the following policy. Emergency repairs in 24 hours. This is a danger to life or extensive damage to the property. The target is 99% 24 hours. Our performance is 99.74. Routine repairs in 10 working days. Target 98%. Performance 100%. Just as an aside, at the same time that we were carrying out the inspection, there's a feature on us in the Inside Housing Professional Journal about our repair service, saying how good it was. Still, there's an issue that we need to improve how we report, how we respond to particular tenants' requirements. So we are not resting on our laurels on this performance or repairs and maintenance, even though it's very, even though this is, I guess, top 25% of the authority. More work. Right. Remember that lots of the consumer standards, we're talking about tenants, understanding tenants, tailoring services to tenants, telling tenants how we've changed services. We've got a project called Getting to Know You. Getting to Know You, we've done this once before. And this initiative to collect accurate and current tenant information to improve service delivery, understand needs, inform policies and service development, and support long-term housing planning. The project runs from April 26 to March 28. We're trying to get 75% tenant response rate by March next year. Pilot commenced in April, and so targets there is that we are the key drivers to us, so we can tailor services to meet individual tenants' needs. We don't need to understand their needs and to give tenants information. Tenants engagement. I put a quote in there that we saw some evidence that tenants can participate in tenant activities and opportunities, even though we found NCC does not provide meaningful opportunities for tenants to scrutinise performance of services. So what we do at the moment, and what we're planning to do is we're trying to get more tenant reps involved in our groups. Actually, they all must be volunteers. Bigger route for tenants to hold the service to account, standards for service delivery, strategy, performance and decision making, and produce more regular information for tenants on a number of platforms to provide assurance to how we are keeping them safe in their homes. So what we're working for, this is the aims to develop share information with tenants and all stakeholders in relation to risks and how we are meeting key targets. We have a tenants group and board, And we are going to create a comprehensive training and learning support for them to enable them to challenge us and participate and understand the data and in the new governance of methods. We need to produce a performance dashboard specifically for tenants. We're developing an annual report with tenants to include more performance challenge. And we're reviewing the role of the tenants influence panel, asking the tenants to refine its purpose and formalise it into more operational activities. Complaints handling, get the quotes though. The complaints teams are going to be managed by the insurance and compliance manager. Also, there'll be an independent complaints person working in the corporate complaints team. That's more challenge. We're going to introduce and maintain a "You Said We Did" section on the website. I'm going to introduce a regular complaints report to show how we're using complaints to drive sales performance. And we're working in partnership with the corporate complaints team for all the training and support. Right. Well, the big overarching issue we talked about was the stock condition survey. Remember, to recap, in the past, we did it on a sample basis, and that's been the same since the 1980s. We now need to do that on an individual property basis. So this was an early action we went with straight away. So we have to have, recap there, we have to have accurate, up-to-date and evidence information on the condition of our homes. You know, well maintained and safe. And that's the quote again. And it said, what the regulator found was that the county council only has up-to-date stock information on condition of around 3% of its homes. And the last previous condition survey was undertaken in 2012. Again, that was before the county council owned the stock, covering about 10% of those homes. As a result, they do have assurance. Yeah. And that's a very accurate reflection of that. The way we always did it, going back through history, was not on an individual property basis. So what we did, we framed our approach that all social landlords look at their condition and survey every 5 years. When we went to all information, 87% of our properties have no condition surveys on record at all. They're all back to district council numbers. 5% have had a stock condition survey in the last 2 years. 8% have had one in the last more than 10 years ago. However, what we've done, our in-house team has been supplemented to enable this to be carried out quickly with an external contractor. So we are carrying out a full 100% stock condition survey to all our properties to be completed by the 31st of March next year. This is the most important quick action coming out of the regulation judgment. So several were commissioned in March 26. A budget was agreed at the AGM of £1.5 million. HRA to spend on this. We got the contract for 1.275 million to also include energy efficiency ratings, and we'll use it to meet the regulatory requirements and also for us to check the decent home standards, both current and emerging versions, because they are more rigorous, the safety and quality consumer standards, and then the regulatory social housing expectations regarding data accuracy, asset knowledge, and integrity. So, as of Friday, the pilot started in April. Target is we do 1,000 properties a month from June. We did a pilot, and as of Friday, we've done 893 surveys to individual dwellings, which now gives us a 10.93% coverage. So, effectively, what that's saying, we've done more since the regulation on this than was done since the 1980s, okay? On a consistent way which meets the requirements. So 1,000 a month from June. On that basis, we'll achieve it before our target date, or one time for external audit of what's been done, and then to get the data right. Right. Tenant satisfaction measures. This is another area of our performance. So this is a national survey that's done to national standards and it measures resident satisfaction with landlord performance. So all local authorities that own housing stock will be subject to this. Same questions, the same report. So you can compare. So we primarily compare against our neighbours, the North East. So it includes a combination of perception surveys and management data, which are collated to give insights of tenants' experiences and landlord service qualities. It covers complaints, repairs, ASB. It's nationally consistent. Right? This is taken from how we reported to our tenants. So the 25-26 survey results. Just to explain to tenants that we do the survey every year to get feedback on what we're doing well and where we're going to improve, what our priorities should be. And it's surveys representative of tenants as a whole, it's carried out by post and online. And we had 1,019 people sampled, completed the survey. Our headlines. This year's survey results are mostly positive. This is the overall satisfaction. This is the final question. All the issues were 74% are satisfied, 12% dissatisfied, and 14% neither satisfied or dissatisfied. That figure is higher than other local authorities in the north of England. Do you have a well-maintained home? 70% are satisfied. That's how they vary. Does your home feel like a safe home? This is about perception as well. That's 73%. And for those who have communal areas, that's 68%. Repairs, 76% are satisfied with the repairs service we served last year. That's a 3% improvement. And time taken to repair, that's up again, 74%. Communication, 73% are happy. But this is an area we're focusing on. Those who made a complaint, 32% are happy with the response. And while it's logical that somebody making a complaint isn't happy to influence, that shows that the way we do need to change slightly how we do the way we do complaints. Listening to views, that's a lower rate than other North East, so we need to improve on that. And keeping people improved, 57%. Right, it's very difficult to see, but this is the overall. So what we've got there is our figures from this survey, last survey, are the North of England local authority average. So overall satisfaction, we've improved and we're better than the North average. Satisfaction repairs, improved, better. Time taken repairs, improved and better than the North. Satisfaction is well maintained, better. Right. And then these ones we've been focusing on. Satisfaction that the home is safe. We've improved and we're close to the northern average, we're slightly below it. Satisfaction that we listen to views will be improved, or lower than the northern average. Satisfaction will keep them informed, improved, or lower. Agreement we treat tenants fairly with respect to get improved, slightly lower than the average. Satisfaction with complaints, improved, slightly lower than the average. Satisfaction we keep communal areas clean, improved, that's better than the average for the North. Satisfaction that we make a positive contribution to neighbourhoods, very close to the national average, to the North average, but slightly lower, that's improved. Satisfaction with dealing with antisocial behaviour, improved, slightly lower than the average. So what this is telling us that we've improved across the board, consistently improved. Actually, we are still slightly below the average on those issues rather than red. Right. So the next steps, we can have some questions and answers. For feedback to us really on what level of information you require on these, and this will vary by the subject matters. The future will come to you with what we call a root cause report, which will set out very clearly what we think the reasons for where there are problems. There'll be areas that you which look at in more detail, investigate, and then we'll be talking about what resources we circulate. And the key one is now go through performance, is to talk about the regulatory compliance improvement plan, which is the action plan, which has been circulated. With that, I apologise for the length of that, but I think it's important to give everyone the context of what we do on housing as well. So you can make questions now before we move on to the action.
Sorry.
Thanks very much, Rob. Just the averages there we saw for the north or northeast. Is there a difference when you compare to the rest of the country? How the north is?
It's a mixed bag in that sometimes the national averages are higher, sometimes they're lower. So on tenant overall satisfaction, we are above the, we're better than, I think we're better than the national average. The reason why we report on the northeast is that we share more council with our housing stock, particularly in the northeast, because of how we build houses up here. So that's why we report, we benchmark closely with our direct neighbours. But we'll conclude that next time round. If we make a comment to this, we can include all the national performance as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I just wanted, this is probably more of a clarification thing, but the inspections that you're carrying out to reach March next year, is this the way that you're going to be carrying this out in the future every 5 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we did the pilot inspection, we realised that the stock condition survey was going to be a problem. So we looked at the costs of doing stock condition survey work, and we recruited an in-house team. And as a pilot stage, we said we would have the stock condition survey completed by 2029. And at the pilot stage, the regulator was made no comment on that really. They said, okay, we understand that. In the pilot stage of the inspection, there's only us and 4 other authorities involved naturally in this. I think the regulator really clarified how they're going to approach this. So when they came back, we did our formal inspection in November, we said, pretty open, so yes, this is our current performance, we're going to have it done by 29. And they thought that was quick. So as soon as we learned that was going to be a fundamental issue, that was going to give us a C4, that's why we went back to full council and got the supplement to the in-house team to get us to full compliance. Those people then will move away after March. And the in-house team will be doing a 5-year rolling program thereafter. So we'll be doing it after using that in-house team. What we did talk about at a future session is what the stock condition survey tells us. Because as I mentioned earlier, there may well be people who've been in the same house for a long time who haven't wanted to play with that thing. So we may adjust our repairs and maintenance budgets to catch up. And in fact, some authorities, I think, it might have been gainsaid, found that they'd increase their repairs and maintenance by 5%. And you saw what a multi-million-pound budget is. So, yes, so current stage, in-house team supplemented to get us over the line. Thereafter, in-house team to do it on a rolling basis. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Uh, Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I think your introduction, background, and then where we are now, the final statistics, they are very helpful to start the meeting. So as I was reading the report, my view was about the regulatory arrangements, the new regulatory arrangements. Some of them are good because we need to have an individual stock of every house, given the way nowadays we have IT support and everything. So the old-fashioned sampling is not good. On the other hand, I also see some guidelines, like every 12 months, we should go and check the fire alarms. So that sounds to me more like your gold standard service because, the tenant should be trusted to do that, but that we are, right? My question is twofold. Are there, for example, I have come across residents, social housing residents in my patch. When the people come to cut the tree, they don't want the tree. The tree is collapsing. They say, no, you can't enter. So is there anything in tenancy agreement which forces them to comply? Because if you are going into their house to do asset checking, individual, not sample, then there has to be a loss of obligations on the tenants to, yes, we will be available, So otherwise we will be wasting our time. That's what, so the tenancy agreement should be equally tightened up so that we can deliver this.
Yeah. So we could for the question. I think if we take a step back slightly, I went through all those, the code, the requirements for us. And I think we all need to accept collectively that actually this is about the nuts and bolts of being a good landlord, of being the best landlord we could possibly be and improving all the time. So none of the code requirements, I think we say are not really important. However, you're right that there are other issues. For example, I get questions from members about why don't we make sure people know the rules regularly. Actually, this is about the important stuff. But actually, Susan, do you want to talk about how we approach? I alluded to it about the access issue to properties because for a variety of reasons. Sometimes people are in very complex circumstances or have complex needs where they don't feel comfortable about letting people into their houses. So you just talk about how we actually approach this.
Yeah, I think there's two things. I've taken on board your comment about the tenancy agreement. It is in there in the tenancy agreement, in the old one and in the drafted new one. You have tenants' rights and responsibilities, and the responsibility is that they should let us in their properties to carry out repairs, to do whatever we need to do, whether it be gas service and electrical or stock condition survey. But as we know, certain tenants will say no, but we can't just then say, sorry, it says you've signed a tenancy agreement, you've got to let us in. If they won't let us, we've then got to go through the process. We're busy drafting a new no access policy, and absolutely we will try all ways. We're not on the door. We'll ring them up. We've got tenancy support officers that will think are the vulnerable. Is there issues? We'll try everything we possibly can to get in. Sometimes they won't let us, and then our last resort is we can go down a legal route. We'll go to court if we get to let us into that property. And it's not great because it costs us money, but it's a long process. But yes, we can go down.
This is my second question, is just that this is going to increase the overhead of management. Previously, if somebody doesn't give you access, go to the next door, take it as a sample, and then that's done. But the new regulations require us to go into every house. So it is definitely going to put up the overhead. So, and the money. As well, there is also a money issue. Where is this coming from? Is it from the council funds? Or my understanding is that the housing is ring-fenced, everything.
Yeah.
So if the money has to come from the housing budget,
Yeah.
Right? But we are also asked not to raise the rent of people, beyond certain limit. So how are we balancing it?
Can I ask that question before I bring Susan in? And again, that's a very pertinent question, because when I talked about the history, we had a real focus on stock expansion. So the HRA account pays for a variety of things, including we use it for expanding our stock. What all this tells us, well, I've been really clear with Cabinet for the last 2 years, is that because of the need for our existing stock, all the related costing I'm talking about, we'll need to reapportion a greater emphasis on existing stock, being a good landlord, and temper our views on the stock expansion. In terms of access, I'll make another point really clear. In our presentation, there was a lot about understanding tenants and their particular needs. And actually, if you're trying to get access for electrical inspection, say, a standard way of doing service could be, we write to you, say you're going to have a service. If there's no response, whatever, we'll write again, and then you'll write third time, and then you'll do next steps. Actually, the reason why this understanding of tenants is important is if it's a household which is suffering problems, they may not open any letters they receive, or they may not be able to read. So if we understand our tenants, we can approach it in a more tailored way for their needs. Because people's problems don't just, a household has complex needs. It won't just manifest in problems of just us not getting to the electrical inspections and other issues as well.
Yeah, just I think on that, what we often find, we do have a number, more and more tenants with multiple complex needs. And we'll often find, it's not that they just won't let us in to do electrical testing, there may be in rent arrears, that there may be antisocial behaviour problems. We'll usually find, but we need to join that together better. And I think that's the whole thing with this getting to know you, is to absolutely drill down and get to know every one of our tenants and what the issues are. And sometimes with electrical inspections, it's as simple as people don't want it carried out, because if the property's got to be rewired, that means it's going to affect every room in the house, and they don't want to have to redecorate. So sometimes it's as simple as that, or it's not. It's just getting down to those more detailed, issues. And I think once we've got the getting to know you two completed, then we start work on what that means and how we can sort of develop that. Hopefully, it should also help us with our access problems as well. But on what Rob said there, we're very much prioritising what this means. We've got the Housing Revenue Council's got approximately, we have £35 million a year comes in rents. And obviously, we're going to have to prioritise that, because the other big thing as well is, obviously, we're doing the stock condition survey and we don't know what that's going to throw up. That's the we're hoping there isn't anything out there huge that we don't know about, but that could be. So once, that'll be Steph's job. Once we get the information in from that, is to then start looking at that, doing some analysis, and what does that mean going forward for our capital programme.
Thank you. That's a challenging one. New challenges are here. Yeah. Thank you.
I just want to say, I think that the stock condition survey is something that's going to be really fundamental for this committee to have an oversight of. It's got far-reaching implications, as you say, so we need to be really on top of that, getting reports every meeting that we have. And the tenant's voice thing as well is really important for me, because that's something that hasn't gone well in the past, so we've got to have the evidence that that is improving.
Yeah, I think without jumping to work programme issues, Chair, it might be that a detailed item report on the stock condition survey, and we can report back on what the first 1,000 will have told us, and we can sort of report on how, I'd actually explain actually what's being done, because the teams doing the work on commentary and detail on each property. So for you to see examples of actually what it means to see an individual stock condition survey will be useful.
I just wanted to emphasise a couple of things that have come up so far about intelligence and how we gather that intelligence and then use the intelligence. So a lot of the poorer areas, though improving on our tenant satisfaction measures, are about that very point you just made about knowing our tenants and are we listening and reflecting and adapting as well as we ought to what we hear. So if you take that example, at the moment, our headline performance is really positive, as you've seen, apart from electrical inspections, and there are reasons for that. I'm just talk about some of them. However, what the regulator is expecting, and is entirely appropriate to expect of us, is how do you use all of the rich intelligence that you gather to make the decisions and priorities that you need to make. So to the point about stock condition survey and what we do in future, we will have the rolling programme where you could just take an extreme. We've got, at the end of this financial year, 100% of all of our stock condition surveys. We would do 20% every year from there on, and therefore we've always got an up-to-date record, at least within 5 years. That would be a numeric way of doing it. If you look at it against what tenant needs are, what the repairs are telling us, building types, locations, are there themes coming out, which definitely the team will be working through about particular areas of concern. It is legitimate for us, for this scrutiny committee, to advise ultimately Cabinet and full council for the HRA decision to say we want to prioritise the investment in this type of area or this type of property or these types of tenants or all three together, and have a plan over time to do others. And that's a reasonable thing. And if we think about it as almost like an exam, we have to get the right answer, but also show our working how we got there. And that's the bit we can't, hand on heart, honestly, do with the systems that we have in place. And there's a lot of system work in the improvement plan because we don't collide all of those things together systematically. We do that manually, and that creates concerns and issues with data quality, which the inspector certainly picked up on, but also external audit of those. So as you mentioned, with Savills work, we will externally audit the work that's being done. So we're not just assuming what we get on the stock condition service is accurate before we use the data to provide any intelligence on decisions. We need to know the data quality is good and that our system can report on that quality data alongside others as well. So it's a huge system change. Ultimately, if we're spending people's rent money, we need to justify to our tenants again why we're choosing to spend things in the way that we are. And how we decide that decision is as important as what the decision is, if that makes sense.
Some of these issues that we've talked about are matters that are in trade at the moment, so there's working the action plan on that. So I suggest that to no more questions, we go through the action. We've got the action plan up on the screen to give us on the agenda. Put the agenda, put the report back on the screen.
Right.
So about the action plan.
Right.
It's simple. Can I actually confront them and talk through the action plan? just to explain what's happening. I think like particularly what Simon said, I thought about the total mobile work on asset management. Things like that, yeah. You okay with that? Yeah. Oh, you do like that.
Rob, is it number 5 on the agenda? So it's titled Housing Overview, but when I open it, it says Draft Alliance Action Plan. Just check.
The action plan.
Nicola will share that one because it's not immediately clear that's the one you were referring to. She'll share that one and you can tell us whether it's the right one or not.
If I join the meeting, can I? Right. That's it.
Yeah, is that the right one?
Yeah. Right. So, well, I'll start off. The first thing on the action plan, this summarises in a very matter-of-fact way the requirement. So we put for each of the areas what the requirement is, what the weakness is, what actions they are. So this one we've actually talked to already, but this is the safety and quality standards condition of stock requirement, and it's a full stock conditional survey. So there you'll see in the report that's been circulated, we said that the actions we're doing and the time scale, this is the one that we'll talk through with, we want to be finished by end of this financial year, and who the responsible officer is for this. Okay, so if you go down to the next.
I just want to mention on this one, one of the main things for us is we've mentioned quite a bit about data when we were inspected and sometimes inconsistencies. And the one thing we've done quite quickly through Steph and the team is we've sourced what we call total mobile asset management system. And what that'll actually do, we bought it now, and obviously it's going to take a few months to sort of implement it. But we'll have a situation, it's a live system, and it'll give us all the information on one property. So you'll be able to go into a property and it'll tell you everything about the gas servicing, the level of inspection, what the stock condition survey says, whatever, everything will be there on that one property. If you go back to what they're expecting us to know about each individual property, it'll be there as well. And that will link in when we get the getting to know you completed, that'll then link across to the actual tenant who lives in that property as well. So we'll have an overview of the property and the tenant.
Yeah, just to add on, this is the point I made earlier about the individual teams work on things like spreadsheets and databases. This is bringing it all into one place, tied not to a function, i.e. electrical inspection, but tied to a property and the individual property rate level. Go to the next one. Yeah, so this is the next one where we look at the standard, and this is the data requirements about the health and safety assessment. We're putting there what the problems are, and then we're putting there looking at an audit program. The health and safety meeting report approach to this, and then the different roles tied with it, combine a number of people with it. The assurance and compliance manager, Susan, involved. This is an overarching one. You can tell us that one, Susan.
No, I think I just want to say just generally about these improvement plans, it's still very much draft, and it's still it is high level. So it's sort of draft then, we've got the high level. Now we've got sort of Scott working with us now as well. We're going to start drilling down a bit more into this. So there'll be a lot more information. I think a lot more to get this sort of obviously want to get it RAD rated. So I think in the future, very much I would recommend with this meeting with the committee is that we're looking at this as well. Very much look well if there's any red sort of issues going forward, that this is the sort of thing we'll start reporting it into this board.
Okay. Yeah, the repairs brackets of dampen mold, and that talks about what we found out from the inspection, and then how we're proposing to change it. And again, this picks up the issue of a totally mobile database system, and again, getting to know you work, and the new data systems for AAP law. At the moment, that's done on a spreadsheet basis, but that will be migrated in the asset management system. Okay, Carol. Well, this is the.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what we've talked about the transparency, the influence, and again, it's about the getting to know you. I think there's a bit of a theme here. You see how important to us this getting to know you is going to be over the next year, 2 years to get that information. So it's very much about getting the information, obviously monitoring the outcomes and the inputs there. And obviously as well, one of the things was to build resilience within the teams, because this is additional work, and we've done that. We've got more staff in to help us with that project, because it is going to be a huge project over the next couple of years. And we're doing a lot of comms work as well for the tenants to sort of say, if we're sending out a questionnaire, if we're not on your door, we're coming to talk to you, please talk to us, please answer the questions. It is going to be, it's for your benefit. In all frontline staff who use our Northgate's our housing management system, and all frontline staff know what the questions to be asking the tenants, or any time a tenant rings up the contact centre or speaks to us, we're going to try to get that information. So I sort of do huge, as I say, huge piece of work to get as much information as we can with tenants across the patch. Yeah, so I think that's on that one.
Keep scrolling down. This is the engagement one, which it's not just about understanding what the needs are of tenants or listening to what they say, it's actually as well as how we act on this. So this is about setting out governance arrangements, tenant involvement, and then setting out actually is to set out real clear routes to how we are actually going to be enable tenants to hold service to account, including standards for service delivery. And then part of this work as well is to look at actually what level of information we are going to be producing for them on what types of our platforms each year.
And I think part of this as well is going to be, and I'm not sure if I put the point there, it's very much looking at our website. It's quite limited at the moment, what it's got on there for tenants. So I think we're going to be, yes, we've got our newsletters that go out 3 times a year. We've got the annual report that goes out once a year. But we need to really start looking at the website. I think one of the tenant groups is looking at that, so it's a lot more interactive as well. And I think what we probably haven't got on there is that council's bringing in a new CRM system, customer relationship management system, and that's also going to look at bringing tenants, customers access the council. And the first service for that is the repair service. So as well as that, we're very much looking at how tenants access us, or self-serve, and tenants are very much involved in that as well.
Okay, what's going on? So for this one, yes. Yeah. And this is a similar issue, but it is tied to a different code. And it's to how we actually check and monitor, report to you on how we are doing this work, about how we provide accessible information and service standards.
Yeah, it's probably worth at that point to make the point for the terms of reference discussion. There is the potential, if the committee wanted to invite tenant representatives to come and join scrutiny committees, either for specific issues or on an ongoing basis. Rob referred to an existing mechanism we have with Councillor Horncastle and Councillor Swinhoe as the cabinet member and shadow with our tenants at the moment. But of course, that is not a full committee in a formal setting. Sorry, I should say. Of course, this is a recorded meeting which goes onto YouTube as well, so it's a slightly different forum to expect our tenants to come into. But it might be something with some training that we can give support to if you were minded to invite tenants along. That would give the ultimate hold to account. They're our tenants, they're paying for their properties, and you can hold us to account through them.
Right, I'm scrolling down. Complaints management. This sets out what changes we are proposing to make to the complaints management system. And we've tied that to the findings of the regulator. We've been holding discussions with the corporate complaints lead, who's been attending the assurance board. Look at how we can change that, and we've agreed now that looking at a separate specialist housing trained officer that's in the corporate complaints team will challenge what comes out of our own complaints team.
And also on that, the corporate complaints, again, I think those are looking at their system and what they use for recording complaints, and they haven't really been able to do a lot about sort of lessons learned. And so that's something else that I'm going to be starting to look at, and have a bit of a dashboard system. And I'm going to use housing again. I think all of this has been quite timely with our inspection. So housing is going to be one of the first services on that. So that's very positive.
Go down here, please. Yeah. Tenure. This is to do with the fact that we need to make sure that we ensure that tenancies are granted consistently in accordance with the re-tenancy policy. But we are updating that work and that and this spreadsheet set out. What's the you're taking on that? Carry on down. The ASB one.
Yeah, I think one of the criticism in the report was that we didn't separate out hate crime from general antisocial behaviour cases. So what we have done now, got a new module within our housing management system, which just brought on in the last couple of weeks. But that separates it all out, and it's going to help us report much better on antisocial behaviour. So again, that's going to be much more positive, and also will help us to report antisocial behaviour to to this committee, to our assurance board, which we haven't been able to do in the past.
Okay. Yeah. Governance and assurance. This has been there's an overarching issue here. So the action there about to establish the Housing Assurance and Compliance Board. We established as of today, firstly from the Scrutiny Committee. We're also working on data-led performance monitoring, done a best project on that. We'll be going back to you how we will be using data-led performance management on all of this. And we do 2 external reviews. And 1 to by external company called Reach, and 1 by the outside housing, the internal performance teams. Okay. Yeah, the last one is, we put this one on, and while the regulator didn't identify this one specifically, when you look at the code, there's a need for an appropriate level of housing qualification amongst all managers and staff involved in housing, but actually for all teams who work with housing, there needs to be a proper understanding of housing issues. So we're looking at a training package for people, for example, the complaints teams and health and safety teams through training on housing. Okay. I'm saying this is a draft plan, and this is laid out for it's our internal project plan for what we are doing. What I've just looked at chair advice is that the regular items moving forward for this board will be a report, a proper report, not just a spreadsheet like this, a report on progress on all of the improvement areas, and a report as well on the assurance and data on issues as well. With 2 standing reports to this move, which will be on the progress towards these actions and any new actions, and 1 on performance and data, how we're actually doing. And then to close this section, then you'll be able to ask for further reports on particular issues that makes them out of this. It's already talked about that further more detailed reports of additional survey work. Thank you.
Can I ask?
So yes.
So the more I look at the transparency thing, my understanding is that it requires the council to be engaging more frequently with the tenants and then gather as much information as possible and then use it for further purposes. But it's not a question, a suggestion. Is there any way we, the local councillors, can help in that process? At least we can decide if that's a big if, because you might think we are more a hindrance than helpful. So that's a different issue. If there is a pathway, it's worth publicizing it so that it's left to the individual councillors to, take part in that pathway. If they say if there are difficult tenants somewhere, it can officers alone.
I think what this really needs is this will be an additional proper report, and we'll get our team to come along to talk about this. maybe a memo could be that we are actively trying to recruit more tenants to be involved in this.
Yes.
And if we aren't able to get enough penetration of that maybe local members of affairs would help us out with this.
Because I think, what we try a lot as well is, some of our estate officers are out on the patch every day and sort of see, can you identify any tenants who you think might be quite good to get involved? And I think in a similar way, but we,
Right.
you were talking to our tenants as well.
Yeah.
If they're coming, if they are coming to you to complain, it could be, well, why don't you get involved? Why don't you do that? So, yeah, I think it's what Rob said, I think absolutely.
You can send out a message saying,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's nice to have some kind of tenancy association or something,
Yeah,
people representing the area. And, when the next inspection comes, we can say it's not just the tenants and council, even councillors are involved. If it could earn some brownie points or something, because that's what they seem to be asking. Constructive engagement with the customers.
good point.
Does anybody else? Sorry.
Yeah, from a building background myself, could you tell me what the name of the survey contractor was again, please? Savills,
Yes.
right, yeah. I think in the past, we had problems on council properties where we had fascia boards and soffits that were asbestos, and I believe these were covered over with PVC, fascia boards and soffits. Now, these are hidden things, and so your general survey are not going to know historic facts on what happened on the properties when they were getting repaired or they were getting makeovers. What sort of guarantee have we got for, people renting properties or even buying properties? What guarantee have they got on hidden aspects of asbestos?
There are two questions there. The first question is, to what extent do Savills do intrusive survey work? They inspect external, internally. And if they think they need to know something, that's reported back up through their chain of their chain.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've got, as Rob alluded to earlier, we recruited an internal team of stock condition surveyors, whilst we have Savills working with us over the next 8 months. We have that team who are actually doing the quality assurance on the work that Savills are doing as well, who have more of the data available on our current stock, what's happened historically, so they can absolutely go out there and check what Savills are doing alongside the information that we've got.
It's a follow-up they're going to do.
Absolutely, but in terms of intrusive, so they won't be removing any UPVC fascia boards, things like that, but the assurance that we've got in terms of asbestos in that way is that if those roofline products need to be replaced in the future, part of our policy is that those would be surveyed by an external asbestos contractor to make sure that they are safe. So they would have a look behind what was there already. So any kind of encapsulated asbestos would be picked up that way before we work on them.
And sorry, Chair, and sort of a properly MOT of past happenings and things like that. What guarantee has anybody got a house fire on buying an ex-council house?
That's this one. What we'll have, but we do have a lot of this, but what we'll have consistently is all those checks I was talking about gas servicing, electrical inspections, all those things. They will have access to all the certificates done on an annual basis. And I would suggest that when you buy a house of a private person, you normally don't receive that level of assurance. So I would suggest that our houses will come with not an MOT certificate, but it will come with a lot more information. It would be if you did a right to buy than if you bought a private house.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Was it mandated by government we had to get an external company like Savills to do the stock condition survey rather than do it in-house?
No, it wasn't. And we looked at the costs of, because We wanted to do it as quickly as possible because we had to get to the stage where we'd done it 100% and then move on to doing it rolling. Initially, we looked at the costs of doing it externally or internally, and it was much more expensive going into externally. So we recruited a team to work it through to finish it by 2029. What the regulators said with inspections, they wanted to see it done a lot quicker. And what we didn't want to do was recruit a huge team internally. It takes time to get a team in place and recruit to do that initial focus on getting 100%. And then have a team that's either too big or would have to launch fixed term contract. So what we did, we went to the market and said, supplement what we've got to hit the new target. We looked at this, the most cost efficient way of doing it was to go out to a contract. Government didn't say how we had to do it. We did the costs analysis of it and said, hit 2029 would cost X, but to hit next March, we're going to do it was bringing in a very large amount of capacity on a very short term period. So Savills have got a very big team working on this, and they've all their internal and as well, Savills have done this before for other organisations, so they could hit the ground running on this. That's what we're finding that out now. So,
Yeah, just to build on that, Savills are the market leaders, and I think we're really in a great position in terms of having that external assurance coming in at this point in time and looking at all of our stock. So yeah, I think in terms of it was going to be more cost effective, I think, in the beginning to have our internal team, and going forward it's great that we've got them in place to kind of continue the cyclical programme. But from what we've kind of experienced with the regulator, and just to have that external assurance on the quality of our stock, I think is invaluable for us at the moment.
yeah, and just to be clear, what were we doing when because this is a learning experience for our internal teams as well. So once we have all the systems in place, that Savills have delivered the comprehensive stock condition survey, we will be using the same approach when we move forward with our smaller in-house team to do the 20% a year. It's important to note though, we won't do it 20% as a random sample. We'll be focusing it on what the tenant engagement and understanding our tenants' needs works tell us, as well as what the stock condition survey told us. And it's comprehensive way. So we'll be, because some of our stock was built 3 years ago. So clearly we'll be focusing consistently as a priority on the oldest and most expensive to run stock.
Anybody else have a question? Yeah,
I'll go here. Yeah, as councillors, we get a lot of emails for antisocial behaviour. Would it be possible for all councillors in Northumberland County Council to have a direct line email address to forward antisocial behaviour emails?
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we will send some information out. Actually, to our wider ASB team. Remember, our ASB team also operates in places where we don't hold council stock. So we'll get in touch with them and ask them to make sure that all members are aware of general ASB. So we have a housing team as well. We look at the tenancy management. It's what one of the members raised the point about how people run their houses according to the tenancy agreement. So that's a slightly separate issue, slightly nuanced difference. There's an overlap on that.
Yes.
Unless there's any more questions, I don't think there's at the moment. Can't say a few words as a council member for so this is our first inspection, and we were determined that we weren't going to go into it with our eyes closed, which is why we thought we were very responsible by joining the pilot scheme to get some guidance. Unfortunately, what happened during the pilot scheme, the guidance we got didn't relate to anything that was going to actually happen in the actual inspection. That became clear as soon as the inspection started. And it wasn't a very pleasant experience, inspection. But I mean, I think I can say things that the officers can't say, but when the result of this inspection came out, we were alarmed and very upset. I know that all the officers were really upset because we are proud of our housing stock. And you can see from all the figures that you've had today, the 100% and 99%. We had all the information we needed on our homes, but it wasn't in the format that they wanted it. So 2 bits of the data didn't join if there's nothing more good. So they give us a lot of stick about our interaction with the tenants. Yeah, David will know that the Housing Assurance Board, the tenants play a massive part in that. They almost run it. And the Housing Inspection team sat in on an assurance board and saw everything that the tenants, this group of tenants we have that go around looking at all the different properties, feeding back to us. So we feel like we've got a really good interaction with the tenants. Apparently it's not good enough. However, we got a C4, no enforcement taken, so they weren't that concerned, even though we got a C4. But what I'm going to do is, I'm going to read out 1 or 2 things from a report from a neighbouring authority, right? This neighbouring authority got a C3. Now, I'll do my level best to keep the name of this authority out. But that neighbouring authority didn't have a stock condition survey. It wasn't able to accurately report how many homes do not meet the requirements of the decent home standard. And yet we can at 98.6. Was able to provide evidence that it had sufficient understanding of its homes. So all the facts and figures you've had today, they didn't have that. Had 1,800 repairs overdue and works outstanding on over 1,000 damp and mold cases. Electrical safety report that around half its communal areas and a quarter of its homes do not have a current satisfactory electrical condition report. Same with the fire safety. It's got no tenant information. It's got an incomplete tenant information. It's all out of date. That was one of our neighbouring authorities that got a C3. And the condition of those houses compared to the condition of our houses is night and day. So are these inspections consistent? And the other thing is, when it hits the newspapers and the media, it wasn't a housing inspection. It didn't inspect a single one of our 8,000 houses. It inspected our data collection and our scrutiny. Now, we got a C4, we've got to wear it. I can tell you now, behind the scenes, our officers are going at breakneck speed to get everything put right as quick as they can. And we're hoping that in about 2 years' time, we can go to a C2 if that's possible. It came as a shock, but we accept it. It is what it is. Even though we're not happy the way it happened, we've got to wear it.
Yeah, can I just add on to what Colin said, is that the fundamental problem we've got, and the reason why I a lot of time going through it though, is that the history of where we've got to where we are, because with it being district stock, often moved out, often moving out and back in again. My observation on this, having been through this at real detailed level now, looking at the causes behind this, is that when we took it back in-house in 2015, we didn't get the proper grip. All we needed to do was a landlord there. I think that's for to be honest. You know, the key symptom of that, I would suggest, and this is what the regulator really focused on, wasn't it? The regulator is to do with never for a stock having a full stock condition survey done. We absolutely accept that, and that's what was one question about: is the requirement to go and use external So we absolutely accept we need to do that. And when we presented at the start of the inspection, we made that clear. We recognised that was a serious failing we had. We also said that we had a problem with how we reported data. And those two things together, because remember I think it's fair to say what the inspector says. And I presume on one of my early slides, they inspect the landlord level. And what they were saying was, you as a landlord, because you haven't got a full stock condition survey, and because your data reporting isn't coherent and up to date, that we are not, our teams work really hard out there, and the individual performance shows that. But actually, then, if you say, have we got assurance to ourselves that we know for certain that all these things are done consistently and accurately in one place, in one way of reporting? We could not do that. And I think the more we look into this, I think, as a criticism as a landlord, and what's in the teams, I think it's justified in terms of where that we did not have a stock condition survey, and we should have done one. We should have been doing it since, well, like housing associations who've been subject to regulation for an extended period of time, do this all the time. We have not been doing it. So it was a learning experience for us. What I'm really keen to emphasise, and I hope it came across this presentation, that we can agree and disagree about the nuance of any investigation approach and reporting. However, we are taking this seriously and we are doing things about it. Yeah, that's the takeaway here. And actually, yeah, it was I think Colin's made a point that there was a change that we were. I think it was a bold step for us to put ourselves as part of the pilot. And Simon agreed to that, day one of us when he was here, said, yes, it's the right thing to do. I think it's also fair to say that the regulator was finding its feet at the same time. So that really explains why the regulator's expectations changed as they learned more from the pilot what they were doing. Because other pilot authorities also had lots of problems.
Chair, can I ask one thing?
Thank you. I don't think it's helpful to compare with what other regions or neighbouring authorities have had in their inspections. I really don't. The fact is, this was quite an awful report, but the good thing is that we took hold of it. The officers have reacted really quickly to it, and I think this committee needs to support them in anything that they're doing going forward. I'm really happy to see Scott here because he has the background from Carbon. I think it's Carbon, isn't it? So he has that experience of working with that regulatory authority. So I think that's great. But I think, we just have to take responsibility for it and move it on. And the officers are really doing that now. You can tell by this. So we have to give them every support we can going forward.
Colin, in your speech, you used the word C3. I understand C3 is better than C4. Is that correct?
Sorry, Bill, you speak a little bit.
Sorry, you used the grade C3.
Yeah.
So I understand C3 is better than C4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So who are these inspectors? Just to get the background, who are these inspectors? Are they civil servants or experts or political appointees?
I can't answer that.
I can ask the government have set up a social housing regulator now with a role on local authority housing stock. All the inspection teams and the improvement teams we've met all have background in housing management. So they've all worked for housing associations or local authorities before. So they fulfill the sector. They are not generic civil servants. I think it's fantastic. Everyone we met. I'd ask Scott as well, his experience at Carbon. The inspection teams are based from people with sector experience, aren't they?
Yes, that's my understanding, yeah.
Yeah, on that, Paul, local authorities, this is our first inspection, whereas department been this year. They've been going through these inspections for quite a few years now, quite a long time. So it's new to us, but but this year and the rest, they've been used to this. We're on a steep learning curve, which is why we've got this gentleman here who's going to keep us right.
Can I just add to that point if I may? So I guess the big difference between the local authorities and housing associations. So people before you mentioned that housing associations are used to this level of regulation. The C gradings are new to everybody in the housing sector. What housing associations have been used to is what they call the governance and financial viabilities, or just to confuse you guys a little bit more, a G and a V rating. So there's kind of 3 ratings that make that up. So I guess what puts housing associations probably on a stronger footing is they've been used to having some level of scrutiny and some level of regulation, which has meant that in effect they've been partly better prepped for what they've been become. So there is a slight differential, but it was worth just explaining that to you all.
Thank you. I'm conscious you'll want to confirm kind of the term of the reference based on the discussions. But a brief point, I think we all welcome the fact the AGM agreed to set up a committee. It's an important part of our improvement journey and ongoing improvement, because without the scrutiny and assurance that this can provide, we don't have the transparent overall scrutiny on the services that we're going to have. So I'll just, I think we welcome the support, but also we want the challenge from this as well, because otherwise it would just be supporting efforts that we're doing. We need to be challenged on what we're doing.
No, are we all happy?
Thank you.
Should we move on to the terms of reference?
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of reference, are the same, nothing changed since they were agreed council. I was to ask the question is, on the basis of what everyone's heard today, are they happy with the terms of reference? These terms of reference will change and evolve over time. But are people happy with these to be moving forward initially?
Yeah.
I think the members bring the tenant panel in as well. I think that is important in this committee. I think if everybody agrees, of course, to bring tenants in or a tenant panel.
Yeah, a rep for the tenant group.
Yeah, or representative.
Yes. The other thing that I'll turn to Patsy short there. We've got some ideas about the rhythm and cycle of these meetings. And clearly I'll be the meeting chair and vice in between meetings to discuss with them about work programmes, reports for the future. But it'd be useful to know from members what they thought an appropriate frequency of this meeting would be. Given that the action plan covers a lot of issues and the work pattern taking place will not change overnight in terms of the performance figures. But things, certainly like the stock condition survey, will be changing it's 1,000 a month it'll be changing at. So it's a case, I look to Sean on this to what a normal cycle would be for us scrutiny. So with the issue that this is almost a single purpose scrutiny, unlike some other scrutiny committees.
But we've identified some dates on a monthly basis. We've booked rooms accordingly. But it's a case of whether you need each one of those. So what we can do is we can circulate those dates so that members can put them in diaries. And then in consultation with the chair and the vice chair, you can determine as you go through the programme which dates are needed and whether you're ready to report on a particular issue as you go through. Fast. So as I say, we've got dates once a month, but we can circulate those dates to members.
Yeah, I think,
We've got days to use to on now. Always free.
What was from before?
All right, and then Lindsay. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So just to go back to just the point that you raised previously in terms of the resident panel, I know we discussed this previously. So I think there's 2 issues. Whether scrutiny today feels that you want resident co-optees, which I think is what you were raising, both the chair and vice chair. I know that the Housing Assurance Board that both Councillor Swinhorn and Councillor Horncastle sit on have resident representatives on there. They would be slightly different. They're slightly different functions, the two committees. And anybody who was co-opted on would need to understand that this was a committee that met in public, so personal stories or problems or anything they wanted to share in terms of residents would be slightly different in terms of the information. But there is a power as a committee to co-opt non-councillors onto this committee if that's what you wanted to do. Equally, if you wanted the panel representatives to come and talk to you, you could do that as well.
Yeah, I just found it a little bit difficult just going around the room, actually hearing voices with this room. I don't know if it's just the room or if we're in the chamber, maybe it's with the speakers, because I found it quite difficult listening to the voices. Couldn't hear people.
I think Councillor Swinhorn, in terms of scrutiny, we tend to favour this kind of setup because it's more of a question and answer. It lends itself to a question and answer session. But we can look at the acoustics in the room. We think the mics are on, but we can certainly look going forward in different rooms. You know, we've got the new committee rooms upstairs as well, which might lend itself better to optics. We're conscious there's a lot of people in this room, and there's been a lot of talking from Rob, who's at one end of the room. So we'll look at that going forward. But generally speaking, for scrutiny, this kind of setup does work better as opposed to people being in the well of the chamber and there's been on the dais.
Perhaps the chair could remind people to speak up in the meetings. I
Absolutely.
think people were speaking very quietly.
No, thank you.
Sorry, I do have a little voice myself, so I do promise to speak a bit louder.
Thank you. I don't know what's best for the committee, if it's best for a tenant representative to be co-opted or just to invite them to speak to us. I don't know. I'm sure everyone has more experience than you. I don't know if every month is required either. Would we achieve just as much every 2 months or every 3 months when we'll be able to have more updates? I'm not sure. Some others.
The usual scrutiny cycle is every 2 months for the other major scrutiny committees. I think there is the realistic expectation on officers to actually service it and for members to attend. And I think in some senses, probably 2 months, I would sense is about right.
Anybody else have? Sorry.
I tend to think that monthly at the initial stage might be helpful because there'll be so much coming in, and like Sean says, if they're penciled in
Yeah.
for that, don't necessarily have to have one every month. But they're there and booked if we do need it. So it depends on the content coming forward and the work that's being done with the plan.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is one of the things Scott will be working on is what we call collect once, use multiple times approach to performance reporting and data, where you want the basic same information presented in a slightly different way to go to the assurance board, to the regulator improvement team, to EMT, executive management team, and to this group, and enable that to be prepared on a cycle. It may be that 2 months would give us a more realistic time frame for getting the reports put together. What will be important, though, is that the role of calling for additional, and so, for example, the one we've mentioned about the expanded look at what the stock condition survey is, what it's actually doing. My view is probably the same as Stephen Gerrard's, in that everyone's with 2 months could be appropriate.
If we're penciled in for a month and then see where we are in 6 months. See what additional meetings we need, what reports are coming through, what interactions we're having as a committee. I'd be interested to see the, the residents' feedback you mentioned earlier. In quite a lot of the digital dashboards and things like that you've mentioned, also how they work, how they function, and bring in everything that we can possibly, learn about.
I think, if I may, I think from my perspective, my only concern is, I think, and absolutely, we need to bring everything to this committee, and there's no doubt about that. But the fact that papers have to go out a week before, for us to then meaningfully get any information to you, it's going to be very, very tight. Do it in a 3 week turnaround. We are also, as Rob said, EMT, we're meeting the regulator, and we've got the assurance board. It's really tight, and I think if there was just something like a one-off that you wanted us to come and talk about, we could do that. But if you want us to start producing reports, we're not going to be being able to meaningfully do that in a 3 week turnaround.
So,
I think there's two things. One is purpose. So in a sense, what's your role and what are you doing by meeting? And there is an expression, you don't fatten a pig by weighing it. So I think there's something about actually, are you meeting for purpose? But secondly, I think you need a forward work plan. You almost need to be clear about what are the milestones that the improvement project is having, and where do you fit into those milestones? And it may be that some months you do meet monthly, and other months you might not want to meet for 3 months because actually there isn't any. So it's essentially and in a sense, I think that's what the scrutiny officer's responsibilities are. If they haven't done it, they should be doing it. They should get it to you ASAP, in the sense that they should be providing you with that information so you are informed to know what you're doing as chair and vice chair.
So I work sort of leaving on the 2 month period or the month.
2 months would be good. I'd say 2 months.
I'll say 2 months to start with, and then bi-monthly.
If we need any more information, we can always put another one in.
Yeah.
In the meantime, yeah. We're all happy with that, 2 months. Yeah. Anything else?
Are they happy with it? 2 months enough for you? Good enough time.
So.
Yes, okay. Sure. So do we need to take a formal vote or anything on the terms of reference, or can we just, or is everyone agreed?
Sorry, Rob, can you speak up?
Sorry.
Sorry, it really is difficult down this end.
Sorry. So are we agreed then on terms of reference? So just make sure we don't need to take a vote. There's no dissenting voices to that.
We're all happy.
Good.
Just want to make sure that's the case. Okay.
Excuse me, can I clarify the position with regard to the tenants representative? Obviously, the 2 alternatives have been suggested, but I don't think there's been a decision with regard.
So as we discussed earlier, would you prefer a tenant panel or a group of people?
Simon wants to say something.
If I can provide some advice, I think the co-opting is a much more formal stage than inviting to a discussion. So in the starting point, inviting tenant representatives to a discussion about their views is easier for them and for the committee. Co-opting is will take longer and be more resourced.
Yeah. We'd probably co-opt in a year. Perhaps the interviews come along and get good feedback and things like that.
Dare I say you are stuck with the individual if you co-opt as well.
Yeah.
I'm being brutally honest. You may be better off initially if you want a range of views and opinions, and you want to really see if the person that you co-opt is difficult, you then have a problem. It's far easier if you invite.
Yeah. Thank you. So I would sort of in agreement that invite in. Yeah. Anything else? Thank you. Thank you. Very informative. Very much.
Yes.